Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. We're here with a slightly new setup, slightly new internet, slightly new, everything, pretty much. All right, we see Instagram's already paused due to poor connection, so that's nice. Give me just a second, everyone. Let's connect to a proper internet. All right, it says we're connected. Let's go back to Instagram. Hello, Instagram. I think we're live on Instagram. All right, good. We have a slightly new setup, as you can see. We've rearranged the apartment a little bit. I think we're good to go. All right. Good. Kind of good. We'll figure this out. We'll figure this out together. Give me just 1 second, everyone, to get everything set up properly so it works. All right. I think this will be good. Okay. Today's going to be rather short, a little coffee, because we have to go to the doctor. Monday seems to be doctor day, while my wife's thoroughly pregnant, which she is. Due date for the baby is December 24th. It's currently December 10th. So that means we have 2 weeks if we're lucky. First baby, Mr. James, came about a week early. So probably have another week. I have about 4.5 months worth of work to get done between now and then. So we're going to be busy. My camera setup's kind of weird. Right now I'm looking at Instagram. Now I'm looking at everyone else. Not too sure who I'm going to be looking at. See if I can move this camera over just a little bit. Oh, see, there it is. All right. I think that will be okay. Good morning from Ecuador. Buenos dias. Hola, ¿cómo está? All right. Have I ever tipped the dealer? Of course, I've tipped the dealers many times. I've probably tipped the dealer way more than my fair share. I do know some other people tip the dealer way more than their fair share. One person told me that they essentially tip the dealer $25 every time they won a big pot. And I asked, what stakes do you play? They said 1-2. Like, what's a big pot? You know, if I stack a guy for 200. It's like, oh, so you're basically not winning at the game in exchange for helping out the dealers. And it's a tough thing because this guy actually used to be a dealer and he loved and appreciated big tips. And he assumed that now that he was a player, he should be tipping huge because that's what he liked, right? And instead, he's just not a winning poker player or breaking even. He's actually breaking even, so he's probably actually killing the games because every time he wins a big pot, he just pays an extra large chunk of rake. I guess he doesn't view it as paying rake. That's the difference, right? He views it as being nice and friendly and being good. I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want this setup to be. We could sit down. We'd have a different view. Right now it looks like there's a little ball hanging out of my head. Maybe I need to move these trophies onto the middle shelf. I'm not sure. We'll figure this out together. All right. Let's see. Hooded says, you're a blackjack dealer, no one tips you. Even when I play blackjack, I tip the dealers. Often it's after I've ramped up the bets quite a bit. And, that's how it goes. Often ends up being a $100 tip for every 10K bet. Maybe for every 20K bet, give or take. All right. Today, one of you out there wanted me to discuss this. You all can't read this. Paying attention. Now, paying attention is obvious. Everyone says you need to pay attention. And really, the merits of paying attention should be fairly obvious, right? For example, whenever you're paying attention, you pick up reads on your opponents. Whenever you're paying attention, you don't miss the action, right? I was playing with one of my employees the other day, and he just completely missed the action. And he turned his hand face up inappropriately and got a penalty, which I thought was absurd. You shouldn't give penalties for honest mistakes. It was obviously an honest mistake. But if you're paying really close attention, you will never miss the action. You'll also just be able to think clearly about ranges and think faster about your range and your opponent's range and developing a fundamentally sound strategy. And You can also pay attention outside of the table. A lot of people don't necessarily think about this, but paying attention outside the table allows you to keep variance low, right? It allows you to have better relationships in life. It's always interesting to me whenever someone says, oh, I had no idea my significant other was about to break up with me. It's like, how did you not really have any idea? Maybe they're just like great liars or something, but most likely you weren't paying very good attention, especially to the relationship. So while paying attention is obviously important, I think a better question is, how do you pay attention? That's the hard thing. And I think learning how to see the world from outside of exactly what you are thinking about, what you are seeing, is very, very beneficial and very important. If you only see exactly what you see in your own two eyes, well, you're probably going to make significant mistakes, right? Like, say you're playing poker and you see a guy lose a hand, right? Let's say he gets bad beat. That's the only hand you witness. Well, in that scenario, you may think that player is going to go on tilt, right? Which is logical. And whenever some people get bad beat, they get unhappy, they get sad, and then people think that they're going to lose their minds. But in reality, what if that player is actually killing it and they are up a ton, right? And that player may not be inclined to go on tilt at all. Maybe they're just a good player, right? Maybe if you've been paying attention for 20 minutes, you'll realize this player is a good, solid player. They're not going to do anything absurd because they got bad beat. And that will lead you to adjusting to make a mistake because you think your opponent's going to do something that they're not, right? Athenian says, you don't think you should have to count his chips across the table to know when it was a raise. Perhaps the dealer said raise and you didn't hear him. I mean, listen. At the end of the day, poker is a visual game, and it is up to you to know how much your opponent bet. It's not up to the dealer. It's very, very clear in all poker rule books, rule sets. It is not up to the dealer. It is up to you. The dealer can even tell you incorrectly what has happened. And if you listen to that and assume that is true, and it's not true, that's your fault. Which is insane, right? If you think about it. If it'd be like playing some digital online game and the rule, like there was some ruling and it was just wrong, and you were told the incorrect ruling, and then you made a play, and then you just got punished because of it. Well, that actually happens in live games, as silly as it may sound. So what you can do is you can make sure you thoroughly understand what is happening at every single point. Now, I understand. Remember, whenever Athenian was at the river there, he just thought he had the best hand, right? He bet, the guy put in some chips. He's like, yeah, I win. Right? I mean, the thought was not, oh, I lose. I'm trying to table my hand quickly to not slow roll the guy, right? I'm trying to be friendly, if anything. And it's ridiculous to punish someone who's essentially trying to be friendly. And that's tough. So, paying attention will help you mitigate that issue, right? Paying attention will also let you pick up reads. So you may ask, whenever I am at the table, what should I be focusing on? And that's a big question. Really, there are lots of overall things you need to be paying attention to a little bit. And then some things you need to be paying attention to a lot. Anything that's kind of weird, I pay a lot of attention to, whatever it is. Like, say I see a guy, normally everyone puts their bets in the same way, but I see one particular player who puts their bets in really funny. They just like splash them in. Well, with someone like that, I'm going to be way more inclined to pay attention to their bet sizes and the way they put their money in the pot, right? Whenever they're doing weird stuff, like say sometimes they put their chips in like this, sometimes they put them in like this, sometimes they put them in sideways, like that means something, almost certainly. And if you can correlate that, then that's very, very valuable, and that's something that should be paid attention to. Anytime you see anything weird and different from the same player, that is very important for you to focus on, because that's going to give you a very clear indicator of what they are doing, or at least give you some idea of what to look for. Now, of course, they could just be varying it perfectly. Maybe they know the first time they put chips in the pot, they're going to put them in very hard and fast at you. Maybe they're going to do them backhanded the next time. Maybe they're going to do them sideways the next time, and that's just what they do. But that's going to result in either their opponents adjusting in ways that they very likely cannot predict, or their opponent's just doing nothing, or maybe they actually have some sort of horrible read. All right. Marcus says, whenever you're playing 1-2, it's hard to run a bluff because they'll call with one pair at the end because they're not paying attention. Well, Marcus, if they're going to call with one pair, why would you run a bluff? Right? That's just silly. Don't try to bluff people off a pair if they very likely have a pair. Instead, just value bet them to death. It's easy to beat players like that. We have a book for you. Strategies for Beating Small Stakes Poker Cash Games. It very clearly explains how to beat calling stations. I'll even find the page for you. Let's see. Can we find it? Calling stations, page 33. Page 33 of this little book is how to beat people who have horrible, horrible, horrible flaws. And being a calling station is a horrible flaw. Now I know where all my books are and I can actually turn around and reach them whenever I'd like. How fancy is that? Do you ever use speech play? I think this is some silly term that was invented essentially when, what's that guy's name? Will Kasuth was deep. He's like, yeah, I have good speech play. It's like, no, you're just a dick. Sorry. No bad words. This is a family-friendly podcast. So no, essentially no. I don't do anything to make my opponents feel belittled. I don't do anything to ruin the experience for my opponents beyond playing very hard. But I don't, I'm certainly not doing anything horrible, right? I mean, you don't need to be a jerk. You don't need to be a terrible human. You need to be a nice human. So then the question actually does become, do the things you do in the game actually impact you as a human? Right? Like, are you using humanity in poker? Is that something that should be considered? For example, take the game like Survivor. You all know Survivor, the TV show, right? You are supposed to lie and cheat in Survivor. Cheat. Not really cheat. You are supposed to lie in Survivor, right? You're supposed to do things to try to get an edge. And that is part of the game. So you have to be very careful saying you're a jerk because you talked poorly to me at the table. If it's within the rules, it's perfectly fine. And I think you have to be okay with that. Now the question is, should that be within the rules? And that's a much bigger question, a much more difficult question. Should you be able to belittle your opponents? Some people who think speech play is a thing say yes, you should be able to belittle your opponents. You should be able to ruin the game for people. You should be able to ruin their experience. Other people think no. I personally think no. We discussed this just a few days ago. And essentially the question was, should you be able to ban players or disqualify players after they bought in if they ruin the game for other people? And I think the answer is yes. The question though is how do we define it? And that's why it's very important to have highly trained dealers and floor people who know exactly what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So I think that's relevant. You say Daniel, I don't know who Daniel is, employs speech play as well. So the bad person argument is invalid since, Daniel Negreanu. So listen, what we are referring to are two very different things. You are allowed to talk to your opponents. There's nothing wrong with talking to your opponents. Daniel does not belittle his opponents, right? He doesn't say things that make them want to quit the game forever or things that make you want to kill him, right? He says things more like, he's just talking about the hand. Are you allowed to talk about the hand during the game? I think certainly you should be able to do that. There's nothing that ruins the game for people and makes a hostile environment, right? That's a very different thing, and do not confuse the two. But do I do much talking during hands? Almost never. Only when I'm playing in a relatively friendly environment. So, understand that some people think speech play is a nice, fun thing, and some people think... And listen, what is speech play, right? That's really the question here. Is speech play trying to make people feel bad? Is it trying to be overly aggressive? Like, what actually defines it? Is speech play talking in a hand? I don't think that's what people mean when they say speech play. But it seems like that's what Dis thinks speech play is. And if talking during a hand is speech play, then of course almost everyone has done speech play, because obviously I've said things in hands before. And Saying a word in a hand, I think is perfectly in line and very reasonable. Paul says, you consider yourself a tournament player, but cash games are something you need to put on your schedule. What's your advice for this transition? Read Strategies for Beating Small Stakes Poker Cash Games or Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em, and then get to it. But ask yourself, why do you need to put them onto your schedule? And if it's a volume issue, then yes, you do need to put them on your schedule. All right. Going back to paying attention. If someone is talking during a hand sometimes, but not talking other times, that is very often an indicator of strength or weakness. I know that this guy, Zach Elwood, who I've worked with, look at this. Look how easy this is. I can just turn around and get the books. Zach Elwood, he was an author in Excelling at No Limit Hold'em. His chapter was on tells. And I know he has various videos somewhere, I'm not sure where they're located, where he essentially went through a bunch of Will Kassouf hands and broke it down very, very logically. This guy is so logical, so rational. And essentially, if you knew the things to look for, you would just demolish him. Like, he just turned his hand face up every single time. And if you know that, if you know what your opponent's doing, you're going to crush them, right? It's easy to crush someone when they tell you their hands. Now, of course, it's very difficult to break these things down at the table, which is part of the difficult thing when it comes to tells in general. But if you ever can figure that out or correlate it in some way, then it's just so valuable. And if you have regulars in your game who do a lot of talking, then you should be crushing them. Because in general, people who talk a lot are not balanced. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. Everyone thinks, oh, but I like to talk and I'm good and I'm win, therefore I must be doing right. Or maybe your opponents just aren't very good. Like, I'm sure Daniel Negreanu is great and probably thoroughly balanced when it comes to his talking. That said, I bet if we looked at 1,000 hours of him talking, I bet Zach Elwood could break it down in some way that indicated strength or weakness. And knowing that kind of thing is highly valuable. Cash says, a question regarding range advantage. Well, this is not Ask Me Anything today, and we have that over there at the Inner Circle, but let's see. How can the opener ever have a range advantage when the caller naturally needs a stronger range to call? Well, that concept right there is incorrect. Caller does not need a stronger range to call. That is a horribly, horribly misunderstood concept that was presented by David Sklansky a long time ago, called the gap concept, and it doesn't really apply. Also, well, think about this, right? Say under the gun min raises. What's under the gun min raising? If they're good, only very good hands, right? Aces, kings, queens, jacks, tens, ace, king, maybe nines, eights, maybe ace, queen, maybe king, queen. Yet people are calling with 9-8 suited and pocket twos and ace, jack, right? So if you're calling with all these hands that are significantly worse than the opener, then clearly this concept is just not accurate. And those people who are calling with those hands are doing right? You need to be calling with stuff like 9-8 suited and pocket twos, etc., etc. So that concept is just not correct. Also, imagine you raise and then the big blind calls. Big blind should be calling with all sorts of stuff. So preflop raiser essentially always has an edge over the big blind. Big blind needs to be defending very wide because they're getting good pot odds, right? And they're closing the action preflop. Two very valuable things. So understand that I think maybe you're calling way too tightly. I mean, imagine under the gun raises. You're just folding pocket tens. You're just folding ace queen suited. I mean, that would be really nitty. I promise that's really, really nitty. And you're going to have a tough time winning if you're folding very, very good hands like this. You have to understand that you will fare well enough in position, even if your opponent does have a strong range. And very often the opponent will just have a range advantage on all the flops, right? Belittling other players is very bad for the game. If you're a recreational player, why would you have to be belittled when you're trying to have fun? Or why would you want to be belittled when you're trying to have fun? Yes, no one wants that. Okay. Back to how to pay attention. I remember something I read from Tommy Angelo a long time ago. He said something effective: wear a rubber band around your wrist and snap it whenever you're not paying attention. Now, this will result in a very, very, very bruised up wrist. Very bruised up wrist for some people. But something I like to do is at the start of every hand, I try to refocus. I will take my chips, I'll play with them just a little bit, I'll put them back the way I like them, and then I will pay attention. Right? The goal when you're playing poker is to pay attention. It is not to zone out and have a party. Unless, of course, you're not trying to win. Of course, listen, everyone is not trying to win. That's very important to understand. I've discussed this many times. There are 3 types of players, and only one of them really cares about winning. The others don't actually care that much. So anyway, if you're actually trying to win, you need to be paying attention. You need to be focusing. That said, you can focus and you can have a good time. But at the same time, you need to actually be following the action and figuring out what is going on and putting your opponents on ranges. So if you can do that and talk and have fun at the same time, that's great. You don't want to be the guy who's just like always super zoned in and very serious, because then people are going to play differently against you than if you are creating a fun, casual environment. You want a fun, casual environment when you're playing poker. So learn how to be friendly. And maybe even realize you're going to miss some action. You're not going to follow the action perfectly all the time, and that's okay. But do your best to, and actively try to put people on ranges, especially when the pots get big or you're very likely to see a showdown, right? Because that's when you really get to correlate actions to hand strength, right? If it just goes raise, pre-flop, continuation, bet, fold, doesn't really matter so much. And very often, you can miss the pre-flop action and the flop action, and you can reconstruct it. So this is a very easy way to stay jovial and light. Whenever you are playing, realize the pre-flop and the flop action doesn't actually matter that much because you can easily recreate it, right? You need to be looking for frequencies. If you see someone opening every hand, obviously that's important. But if people are playing normally, you're not going to really be able to pick up a whole lot. It's not like you're going to know a guy raised 32% of hands versus 28% of hands. And if you do, it just could be short-term variance anyway because you're only watching 30 hands. So what you want to be looking for is more of things that very clearly indicate strength or weakness. It's not just, oh, he bet, so he must be strong unless the guy's really bad. But that is something you need to be looking for and being aware of, right? Let's see. Your card room has a $50 rebuy tournament with a $20 rake. Yes, that rake is too high. Do not play that game. Okay, so